The wind came low through the scrubland, lifting dust into the last orange light of day. A single crow passed overhead, wings stretched like morning cloth. Beneath it walked a boy, no taller than a fence post, coat torn, cheeks hollow, his eyes watching every shadow like it might bite. Colt Avery had been thrown from the westbound train just past the town of Marlow. The note pinned to his chest flapped like a dying moth in the breeze. Asterisk, too much trouble. Can't keep him. Asterisk, no one had come to collect him. No arms opened. No voice called his name. The conductor had simply nodded to the sheriff and gone, leaving Colt on the platform with only silence for welcome. Sheriff Horace Grieve had taken one look at him and sighed like a man being handed another burden on top of too many. No family. No skills. Lord help us, he muttered. Colt didn't flinch. He was used to being weighed and found wanting. They gave him a cot in the back room of the jailhouse. The mattress was straw and spiders. Meals came cold, or not at all. His days were spent sweeping boardwalks, filling water buckets, fetching pipe tobacco from a store clerk who called him Rat Boy when the sheriff wasn't looking. Colt didn't complain. He knew better than that. Complaining only made fists come quicker. 3 days after his arrival, with only a crust of cornbread tucked in his coat, Colt wandered past the church toward the edge of town where the woods began. There, behind the thornbush and cedar trunks, he felt something watching him. Not something. Someone. She sat crouched on a low limb, feet bare, dark braids strung with bark strips and feathers. Her dress was buckskin and stained, her arms marked with dirt and charcoal. Her eyes, coal-black, locked on his. Neither moved for a long moment. Then Colt took the cornbread from his coat and placed it on the ground between them before walking away without a word. The next morning, he returned. The cornbread was gone. In its place sat a crude bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, a squirrel, skinned and cleaned. So it began. They met in that clearing, day after day, never speaking. She never gave him a name. Neither did he. Words were fragile things, easily twisted or taken. They traded instead, a broken compass for a deer bone necklace, a blanket corner for a braid of dried berries. They moved like two shadows learning the shape of one another. The town didn't miss him. When Widow Langtry spotted him slipping behind the butcher's with a girl in tow, she gasped like she'd seen the devil himself. "That savage girl's been creeping near the schoolhouse," she hissed. "What's he doing with her?" "Plotting, I'd wager. That one was always wild." The whispers spread through Marlow like fire licking dry grass. Sheriff Grieve sat Colt down the next day, fingers drumming the table. "You listen now. That girl, she's Cherokee, or worse. Escaped from one of them schools out east. She don't belong here. Neither do you, if you keep running with her." Colt met his gaze without blinking. "She ain't done nothing." "That's not the point," the sheriff snapped. "Folks talk. You want to sleep indoors, you best start acting like you belong to somebody." That night, Colt found her again. She was waiting by the creek. The moon was thin as a nail paring, and the frogs had gone quiet. He told her about the sheriff's warning in short, blunt pieces. She didn't speak for a long while. Finally, she said, "They always think quiet means danger." Colt looked at her. "Maybe it means we listen better." That night, he led her to the barn. It stood just past the last cornfield, sagging and gray, half its roof caved from storms past. No one used it. It was hollow and cold, but dry. There, with old hay and scraps of canvas, they made a place, a rough one, a quiet one, but theirs. She brought dry moss and flint. He brought the sheriff's extra matches. The fire they built was small and cautious, like a secret. In its glow, her face softened. She told him her name then. Ayoka. "It means she brought happiness," she said, though she didn't smile when she said it. Colt said his name too. He didn't say it often. Saying it made it feel like it belonged to someone he barely remembered. Ayoka told him about the boarding school. They had tied her down to cut her hair. Slapped her palms with rulers when she whispered to herself in Cherokee. She ran away in the night, walked until her feet bled, and kept walking. Colt listened. Not just because it was terrible, but because it was familiar. He told her how his ma gave him up to a preacher in Missouri, who beat sin into him every Sunday. Told him if he ever spoke out of turn, God would strike his tongue dumb. Eventually, Colt stopped talking altogether. And when the preacher died, the church passed him off like a dog no one wanted to bury. Ayoka reached out and touched his wrist, gently. Her fingers were rough with callus, but the gesture was softer than anything Colt had felt in years. He didn't pull away. They sat that way until the fire sank into coals. Outside, the wind moaned over the fields. Inside, the quiet held them both, not as prisoners but as something else. Something forming. They didn't have the words for it, not yet. But when Colt closed his eyes that night on the cold barn floor, listening to her breathing nearby, he didn't dream of trains or fists or empty plates. He dreamed of a stream running clear over smooth stones, of footsteps beside his, and of the strange, slow warmth of being seen and left unbroken. It was not love. Not yet. But it was a beginning. The first sign of trouble came with hoofbeats on dry ground. Colt heard them before he saw the dust. He was returning from the river, arms full of firewood, when the air changed. It had a weight to it, a charge like lightning hadn't struck yet but was thinking about it. He ducked low in the tall grass, heart thudding, and watched as 5 riders passed the far edge of the field, heading straight for the barn. Ayoka was inside. He dropped the wood and ran, legs aching from too many half-meals, lungs scraping at the dry August air. When he reached the barn, she was already on her feet, her small bundle, knife, necklace, water flask, clutched to her chest. Her eyes met his, not in fear, but in readiness. They had always known this day would come. Safety, they had learned, was never more than borrowed time. "They saw me," Colt said, breathless. She nodded once. "Then we run." Outside, the sky had turned steel gray, the kind that held thunder behind its teeth. They slipped out the back, moving like smoke through corn stalks, silent as ghosts who refused to be mourned. Colt knew the land better now, the hollows, the thickets where bramble grew thick enough to swallow footstep. The barn shrank behind them, then vanished, and still they kept running. At the edge of the woods, the first raindrop hit Ayoka's cheek. She didn't flinch. By the time they reached the creek, the sky was cracking itself open. Rain poured in sheets, blinding and cold. The creek had swollen, frothing and rising with each breath of the storm. Colt hesitated, eyeing the current. "We can't cross here," he said. "We must." Ayoka stepped in first, boots vanishing beneath water the color of ash. The current gripped her legs, but she moved forward, steady, small arms out like wings balancing on wind. Colt followed, teeth clenching as the cold bit deep. Halfway across, his foot caught on a slick stone and he fell. The river swallowed him. For one dizzy moment, the world turned black and wild. Then hands, small, fierce, grabbed his coat collar. She hauled him up, water streaming from both of them like they'd been birthed by the earth itself. He gasped, coughed, and clutched at her. They reached the far bank, crawling up through mud and reed. Thunder rolled behind them like a cannon. The posse, if still chasing, wouldn't follow through water like that. Not in this storm. Still, they didn't rest. A mile deeper into the woods stood the old trapper's cabin. Colt had found it weeks ago while looking for firewood, a hollow shell with no doors, just walls and roof, half covered in ivy and thyme. It wasn't much, but it stood, and right now that was enough. They reached it just as the storm broke apart, rain slowing to a whisper. Inside, it smelled of rot and old smoke, but it was dry. They built a fire from what Colt had managed to carry, and sat wrapped in the musty quilt they'd stolen from the church's laundry line 2 nights before. Ayoka took out her knife and began carving a small bird from a piece of cedar she'd kept. Her hands moved with calm purpose. Colt watched her fingers, not the bird. He liked how quiet she was when doing something that mattered. "I never thought I'd stay anywhere this long," she murmured. "Me neither," Colt replied. Outside, the storm passed on. The woods grew still, then bloomed with frog song and the hiss of wind in leaves. Ayoka finished the carving and held it out to him. It was rough, but shaped with care, wings outstretched, head tilted as if listening. It remembers where home is, she said, eyes on the fire. Colt took it gently. He turned it over in his palm. So do I. They slept side by side that night, not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. Neither had spoken the word family. Neither had to. The days that followed settled into quiet rhythm. They hunted together, shared the silence without needing to fill it. Colt began learning Cherokee, small words first, then phrases. He liked how it sounded in his mouth, like something older than pain. She taught him which berries wouldn't kill him, how to walk without snapping branches, how to braid cord from rivergrass. They were no longer shadows passing in the dark. They were something stitched together by time, tenderness, and the refusal to let sorrow define them. Weeks passed. No one came. One crisp morning, Colt awoke to find Ayoka outside, sitting on the cabin step, watching the creek. Her braids shimmered in the light like strands of wet earth. "Think they'll come again?" he asked, stepping beside her. "Maybe," she said. "But we're further now. Harder to find. And if they do, we'll run again." He nodded. But inside, something in him resisted. Not fear. Not exhaustion. Something like resolve. "We shouldn't have to," he said. She didn't answer right away. Then she turned and looked at him, her gaze steady and clear. "We won't always." They went back inside and marked the wall with a piece of charcoal, one mark for each day of freedom. 47 so far. Each one earned with breath, with silence, with kindness. By the time the leaves began to fall, Colt had grown taller. His voice deepened, his shoulders hardened. He laughed more now, and when he smiled, it reached his eyes. Ayoka, too, changed. Her quiet had softened at the edges. She sang sometimes while she worked, low, rhythmic melodies in her tongue, like stories without words. They didn't call what they had love, but they protected it like it was sacred. One night, the wind blew colder than usual. They sat by the fire, blanket draped across their shoulders. Ayoka leaned her head on his shoulder without a word. He didn't move, didn't speak, only closed his eyes. In that stillness, the world outside, its laws, its judgments, its cruelty, felt far away. Here, they had chosen one another, and in doing so, had chosen themselves. The next morning, he placed the carved bird on the windowsill. It faced the woods, but its wings pointed inward, toward home, and somewhere in that silent cabin, between the hanging herbs and drying pelts, two broken pieces had become something whole. Not with ceremony, not with permission, but with quiet, undeniable truth.